Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that, without ever seeing a red warning light, your wealth has quietly slipped through your fingers. You check your accounts, you tally your investments, yet nothing seems drastically wrong. And still, the trajectory of your financial life is bending downward, almost imperceptibly. This isn't a story about bad luck or market crashes. It's about the silent, invisible system silently extracting value from your daily decisions, right under your awareness. This is the trap. Here's the truth. Most people never admit, wealth is not just about earning more, saving more, or hustling harder. Wealth is about survival inside a set of rules most of us never see. There is an architecture, a hidden framework of cause and effect governing money, complex, unforgiving, and designed to punish the smallest lapses. You might think you're making normal financial choices, but normal isn't safe. Normal is the path that leads silently, inevitably, to erosion. Picture your money as a river. It flows with a natural current, unstoppable and powerful, but it can be diverted. Sometimes subtly. A pebble, a branch, a small sediment buildup. Each day, small obstructions accumulate, and over time, the river no longer reaches the ocean. This is exactly how the daily habits of most people destroy wealth without them realizing it. You might not notice the erosion today, tomorrow, or even in 5 years. But one day, the floodgates of consequence open. And by then, it's too late to reverse the flow without extraordinary effort. Now, let's confront the uncomfortable reality. Most financial advice you've been fed is deliberately surface level. Save more, spend less, invest early. It sounds logical, but it's almost irrelevant in the grand architecture of wealth creation and preservation. Why? Because it ignores the invisible forces at work, the psychological, behavioral, and structural traps that determine who thrives and who silently collapses. The problem is not your paycheck. It is not even your discipline. It is the unseen system that rewards certain patterns while ruthlessly punishing others. Silent anxiety has a way of creeping in here. You feel it every time you glance at your bank account. Every time you scroll past someone else's lifestyle online. Every time you consider a purchase or an investment. That small, nagging tension is the body's recognition of a deeper truth. The financial ecosystem you operate within is far more subtle and predatory than you realize. And most of the people around you, the ones you trust to model success, are complicit in the illusion. They are trapped too. This is why most people never escape. Here's a startling fact. Research in behavioral economics consistently shows that human beings systematically sabotage their wealth through daily, unconscious decisions. Decisions that appear rational, normal, even safe. Yet over time, these decisions compound, not in your favor, but against you. And the terrifying part? By the time the consequences are visible, the damage is mathematically irreversible for most. This video is not about fear-mongering. It is about unveiling the structure, the invisible machinery, behind wealth destruction. Because once you see it, you can control it. Once you understand the rules, you can bend them to your advantage. The silent killers are not mistakes in isolation. They are patterns, habits, and mechanisms embedded in your daily life. And recognizing them is the first step toward reclaiming the power they steal from you every single day. Think of it like a high-stakes game in physics. Each day is a microcosm of energy transfer. Small misalignments in force, direction, or momentum might seem insignificant. But over months and years, these small errors accumulate into catastrophic failure. Your wealth is governed by the same laws. Momentum is real. Compounding is real. and erosion is inevitable if you don't understand the underlying forces. So here's what you must know. What you don't see matters more than what you do. The daily actions that destroy wealth are not loud. They don't come with sirens. They are subtle or psychologically engineered leaks in your financial ecosystem, and they operate regardless of your income, intelligence, or intentions. This is where structure reveals itself, and this is where most people will fail. Silently, invisibly, but consistently. By the end of this video, you will not only see the 3 silent actions killing wealth without warning, you will understand why they exist, how they exploit the human mind, and how to neutralize them before they destroy your financial life. The revelation is not in a quick fix. It is in the system. The trap will be exposed, and you will be equipped to navigate it with precision. But before we get to the solution, you must first understand the mechanism, the architecture of silent financial decay. You must confront the uncomfortable truth that the very habits you consider harmless, or even good, may be doing the opposite. This is why most people never escape. And this changes everything. To understand why wealth disappears silently, we must first dismantle the illusion that money is purely personal. You've been conditioned to believe that financial failure is a matter of discipline, intelligence, or luck. That if you just work harder or save more, everything will align. This is false. What controls financial outcomes is not individual effort alone. It's the invisible architecture of money itself. This is the system, and it's unforgiving. Consider the metaphor of a building. Your financial life is not a stack of bricks. It is a complex structure held together by pillars you cannot see, cash flow alignment, sub-behavioral thresholds, and compounding vectors. One weak pillar doesn't trigger collapse immediately, but the structural integrity is compromised. Over time, stress concentrates on these invisible points, cracks form, and collapse begins silently. What looks like a minor financial misstep, overspending on a new gadget, skipping an investment contribution, or ignoring a rising debt, can, over years, compromise the entire structure. The first cognitive shift you must make is this: wealth is systemic, not personal. Every decision interacts with hidden forces, and most people are blind to these interactions. For example, consider the expense creep effect. On its own, an extra $20 a week seems negligible. But layered on top of recurring fees, inflation, lifestyle expectations, and opportunity cost, it creates a compounding drain that erodes tens of thousands over decades. The erosion is silent, invisible, and psychologically invisible. This is why income alone cannot secure wealth. This is where structure reveals itself. Now, let's remove the personal shame. If you've ever felt guilty for failing financially, it wasn't entirely your fault. The system is designed to exploit predictable human behavior. Behavioral economists call this cognitive exploitation, a mechanism where everyday impulses, comfort, convenience, social validation, interact with financial structures to produce predictable leakage. It's why intelligent, disciplined, well-intentioned people often see their wealth plateau or decline despite good habits. This is not weakness. It's a trap embedded in the system itself. Take a closer look at the daily routines that feed the invisible drain. People check their phones for investment updates, scroll social media, and compare their lifestyles to curated images of others. Each micro-decision, buying a trending product, upgrading a subscription, taking an impulsive trip, may feel harmless. Yet these small actions collectively recalibrate your financial trajectory downward. Like minute shifts in tectonic plates, the results are invisible at first, But when the pressure releases, the earthquake hits. And by then, it's too late to fully recover without radical intervention. This brings us to the first principle of invisible financial architecture. Every action carries structural consequences. Money is not just a medium of exchange. It is a dynamic system responding to behavior, timing, and compounding. Consider cash flow as energy in this system. Every inflow has the potential to multiply. Every outflow carries latent opportunity cost. Humans are not naturally wired to manage this system. They are wired to consume, to respond to emotional cues, to chase instant gratification. This mismatch is the core reason silent wealth erosion exists. Behavioral finance studies repeatedly demonstrate that humans systematically underestimate future costs and overestimate future income. This isn't laziness, it's biology. Dopamine pathways reward immediate satisfaction, while delayed benefits fail to trigger the same response. The invisible architecture of money exploits this mismatch. Daily choices, opting for convenience, hedonic spending, ignoring minor fees, create asymmetrical losses. Small today, devastating over decades. This is why wealth can be destroyed without ever seeing a red flag. Now let's examine leverage, not the kind used in investing, but psychological leverage. Social comparison is a subtle yet powerful force. When your peers purchase a new gadget, take an exotic trip, or flaunt a lifestyle, your brain interprets it as a standard. Even if you consciously know it's irrational, the unconscious triggers prompt financial concessions. You buy to align, to signal, to belong. This daily action is not a moral failing. It's a predictable, systemic pressure, and the cost is real, invisible, and cumulative. Here's the next layer: structural time. Wealth doesn't operate linearly. Daily actions are vectors in a compounding system. One impulse purchase might cost $50 today, but its true cost is not $50. It's the lost compounding that $50 could have generated over 10 or 20 years. This is why understanding invisible architecture matters more than raw income. You may earn more than your peers, but if your vectors are misaligned, your wealth trajectory lags behind someone earning half as much but executing with system alignment. This is the hidden lever of financial success. Finally, consider risk misalignment. Most people misjudge the interaction between exposure, capacity, and timing. Buying a high-ticket item today without considering future obligations is a tiny misalignment, but it interacts with existing debts, lifestyle expectations, and opportunity costs, creating structural imbalance. These are the silent cracks in your financial foundation, accumulating unnoticed. But by the time they manifest as a crisis, the damage is often irreversible without radical intervention. The first cognitive shift is now clear. Stop thinking in isolated transactions. Start thinking in structural interactions. Every dollar spent, saved, invested, or delayed is part of a system. Each decision either strengthens or weakens your architecture. Understanding this shifts your focus from guilt and blame to observation and control. To illustrate, let's use a biological analogy. The human body maintains homeostasis. Small deviations, like missing sleep, poor nutrition, or dehydration, don't kill you immediately. Yet chronic deviation leads to disease, weakness, or failure over time. Money behaves identically. Daily deviations, skipping investments, incurring minor fees, or yielding to impulsive spending are small today but compound silently, eroding resilience. Your financial immune system cannot fight invisible systemic decay unless you understand the architecture. This is where most people fail. They operate in reactive mode, Alerts, warnings, or crises only trigger action when damage is already advanced. The wealthy operate in anticipatory mode. They see structural pressure points before they manifest and align their decisions with long-term vectors. This is not luck. It is mastery of system awareness. And this mastery begins with recognizing the invisible architecture, the hidden, interacting forces that dictate whether daily actions preserve or destroy wealth. By the end of this section, you should feel a release from personal shame and an ignition of curiosity, as wealth is not a test of morality or intelligence. It is a test of structural awareness. Once you see the system, you can manipulate it, protect against hidden erosions, and begin executing actions that compound advantageously instead of destructively. But here's the unresolved tension. The first silent action that kills wealth is already embedded in your daily life. You don't need to spend recklessly or make obvious mistakes. You may be disciplined, cautious, even frugal. Yet this hidden action drains your financial energy like water through a cracked dam. Understanding the mechanics of this invisible drain will be the first key to reclaiming control. And that is exactly what we will explore next. Most people believe that their financial choices are rational because they can explain them consciously. I need this for work. This is an investment in my happiness. Everyone else is doing it. But behavioral finance exposes the hidden truth. Humans are predictably irrational. Daily spending, saving, and investment decisions are heavily influenced by unconscious triggers that hijack reasoning. These triggers are invisible, relentless, and extremely costly. Take emotional spending. It is more than an occasional indulgence. It is a behavioral trap coded into the human brain. Dopamine spikes, social validation, and identity reinforcement converge to create spending impulses that feel urgent, necessary, even unavoidable. When someone buys a luxury item or splurges on an experience, it often satisfies an emotional need rather than a financial strategy. And the consequences are compounding. Every time you give in to emotional spending, you weaken your long-term capital trajectory. The erosion is slow and silent, but the math is brutal. Consider the status illusion, the phenomenon where perceived social rank drives financial choices. Your brain interprets visible signs of wealth in peers as a standard for your own behavior. The result? Lifestyle inflation. A modest raise or bonus doesn't expand wealth. It inflates expectations. The car, the apartment, the gadgets. They seem harmless individually, but collectively, they consume capital that could otherwise compound into generational wealth. This is identity-based financial self-sabotage. Your sense of success is dictated by external signals rather than systemic logic. Now, let's break down cognitive traps. Anchoring is one of the most insidious. Humans fixate on initial reference points. The first price we see, the first figure we consider acceptable, the first standard of living we adopt. Once anchored, all subsequent financial decisions are influenced, even if illogical. For example, if your first apartment in a city costs $1,500, that anchors your perception of acceptable housing costs. When income rises, your system unconsciously scales expenses to match, ensuring that increased earnings rarely translate into increased net worth. This invisible trap keeps your wealth on a treadmill, working harder but moving nowhere. Another key mechanism is loss aversion. Behavioral studies reveal that the pain of losing money is psychologically twice as strong as the pleasure of gaining it. This leads to overly conservative investments, delayed action, or avoidance of high-value opportunities. At the same time, small, frequent losses, subscription creep, fees, unnecessary purchases don't trigger the same alert system. The brain tolerates them until they accumulate into a structural deficit. Silent wealth decay exploits loss aversion by combining minor leaks with avoidance of strategic action, creating an asymmetrical drag on your trajectory. Let's examine the paradox of rational thinking. Intelligent individuals often fail financially, not because they lack knowledge, but because they overestimate their control. Cognitive bias, overconfidence, and emotional signaling combine to produce decisions that look logical on paper, but are catastrophically misaligned with long-term outcomes. For instance, someone might invest in a diversified stock portfolio, but simultaneously finance a lifestyle that absorbs more than half of net gains. The system sees this as erosion, even though the individual perceives progress. This is the invisible betrayal of daily action. Behavioral economists have quantified these patterns. Surveys consistently show that over 70% of adults cannot accurately estimate the cumulative cost of minor monthly expenses over a decade. Subscriptions, small indulgences, and recurring fees are often considered free or negligible. But when compounded over time, these small actions are equivalent to giving away a small fortune silently. The impact is mechanical, predictable, and entirely avoidable, yet almost universally ignored. Here's another dimension: identity-based financial sabotage. Your self-concept dictates your money behavior more than knowledge or intention. If you identify as someone who spends to enjoy life, your system will generate justifications for financial leakage constantly. If your identity is saver or investor, but your environment and social cues reinforce consumption, cognitive dissonance emerges. The result? Inconsistent actions, hidden erosion, and financial stress that seems inexplicable. This is why awareness alone is insufficient. The architecture of identity interacts with environmental triggers to produce persistent, subtle damage. The behavioral traps extend to status signaling as well. Humans are wired to convey rank and capability through consumption. From cars to electronics, the invisible cost is a systematic drain of capital. Each purchase signals belonging, power, or success, but at the price of long-term wealth. This is why some high-income individuals appear wealthy yet have negligible net worth. The behavior is rational socially, but destructive financially. Understanding this divergence is key to breaking free from the silent erosion mechanism. Finally, let's consider deferred consequence illusion. Humans naturally discount future outcomes in favor of immediate comfort. That $200 impulse today seems minor because its impact in a month, or even a year, is invisible. Yet the system compounds against you. Daily micro-decisions, repeated relentlessly, create structural decay equivalent to serious financial loss over decades. The invisible tax is real, and it is enforced without warning. The first action that kills wealth without warning is clear. Daily decisions that prioritize emotion, status, and short-term satisfaction over systemic alignment. This is not about occasional indulgence. It is about repeated patterns that interact with behavioral, structural, and compounding systems. Each purchase, each decision, is a micro-decision vector. If vectors align with consumption and impulse, your financial trajectory bends downward, even if income increases. Now consider the psychological tension this creates. You're disciplined, you earn well, you do everything right on paper, but still, your net worth stagnates. Why? Because your daily actions operate within invisible constraints imposed by identity, social comparison, and cognitive biases. Your brain doesn't just allow financial erosion, it encourages it under the guise of normalcy. This is the structural trap. This is why most people never escape. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. Awareness alone is insufficient. Knowledge without strategic realignment of habits is powerless. The behavioral traps described here are daily, recurring, and deeply reinforced. They are invisible, subtle, and psychologically satisfying, making them the perfect agents of wealth destruction. The solution begins with recognition, followed by intervention. You must identify which daily actions are vectoring your wealth downward. You must restructure your identity to resist unconscious triggers, and you must design systemic safeguards to prevent repeated erosion. But before we map these interventions, we need to understand the next layer. The mathematical engine behind wealth, and why small daily deviations compound into massive long-term consequences. That's where we go next, into the numbers, the velocity, and the silent mathematics of wealth destruction. Wealth is not abstract. It obeys rules, mathematical, structural, and compounding rules that are as unforgiving as the laws of physics. Understanding these rules is not optional. It is mandatory if you want to stop silent financial erosion. Most people fail because they see money only as a tool for immediate use, failing to recognize it as a vector, a velocity, a force that can either amplify or destroy over time. Let's start with compounding, the engine most people misunderstand. You likely know the term in a superficial sense. Invest early and let compound interest work. But compounding is more than numbers in an account. It is a systemic multiplier of all your financial actions, positive or negative. A single daily decision, spending $10 unnecessarily, delaying a $50 investment, or missing a debt payment, interacts with compounding vectors over decades. The result is not linear. It is exponential. Small misalignments today create structural deficits tomorrow. Consider this example. You delay investing $500 a month for just 5 years. At a 10% average annual return, your eventual capital at retirement would be reduced by over $200,000. Meanwhile, a small, consistent, unnecessary expense of $20 daily compounds to an erosion of nearly $150,000 over the same period. The numbers are not hypothetical. They are structural truths. This is why invisible daily actions matter more than headline income. And this is why wealth can vanish silently. The mathematics of erosion outpaces the mathematics of growth when habits are misaligned. Next, capital thresholds. Wealth is not continuous. It operates in discrete, there's escalating levels. Hitting a certain threshold unlocks opportunities, access to investment vehicles, leverage options, tax structures, and asset classes unavailable at lower levels. Yet daily micro-decisions often prevent individuals from reaching these thresholds. Missing even small contributions, overspending, or delaying investments by months or years can trap someone below a critical threshold, rendering them unable to access asymmetrical opportunities. This is where financial velocity comes into play. The speed at which capital grows is dictated not only by returns, but by whether thresholds are breached consistently. Wealth velocity is a concept rarely discussed, but critically important. Think of your capital as a moving vehicle. Income adds momentum. Investments create acceleration. But friction, daily erosion, fees, and emotional spending slows the vehicle. If friction exceeds acceleration, velocity approaches zero, regardless of gross income. This explains why many high earners stagnate. The system penalizes small, repeated inefficiencies disproportionately. Even moderate friction, compounded over decades, can prevent wealth accumulation entirely. Let's apply numeric modeling to illustrate. Assume a person earns $100,000 annually. If they save 20%, invest with a 7% annual return, and avoid unnecessary friction, their wealth in 20 years approaches $750,000. Now introduce 3 small erosions: $200 monthly in discretionary spending, $50 monthly in subscription fees, and $500 annual impulsive purchases. Compounded over 20 years, these seemingly trivial daily decisions reduce final wealth by over $200,000. The velocity of capital is now structurally slowed. This is invisible, silent, and often misunderstood, which is exactly why the erosion remains undetected until it manifests as stagnation or crisis. Escalation examples show even more stark contrasts. If someone begins compounding correctly at $500 monthly versus $1,000 monthly, the difference at the 20-year mark is not just double, it is amplified by systemic multipliers. Compound interest does not treat money linearly. Delays or deviations, even small ones, multiply loss, creating what can only be described as a compounding drag on financial reality. Wealth is not created by income alone. It is created by aligned vectors executed consistently. The math doesn't negotiate. Now, consider capital in context of opportunity cost. Every dollar spent outside of systemic alignment represents not only a loss today, but a potential loss of exponential gain tomorrow. A $50 impulse today may forfeit hundreds or thousands in compounded future earnings. This is why daily microactions are far more powerful than occasional windfalls, bonuses, or income increases. You may earn more, but if your system is leaking, wealth evaporates invisibly. This is the hidden calculus most financial advisors never emphasize because it requires a systems-level perspective, not a surface-level prescription. Finally, escalation demonstrates thresholds of systemic advantage. For example, reaching $100,000 in investable assets unlocks access to higher-yield investments, better leverage options, and financial instruments unavailable at lower tiers. I'm reaching $250,000 or $500,000 compounds these advantages further. Yet silent wealth killers, daily impulses, status inflation, or minor inefficiencies can prevent entry into these thresholds. This is the difference between someone who appears average at 35 and someone who becomes a millionaire by 50 despite comparable income. The math is structural, relentless, and immune to excuses. To close the loop, the invisible killers interact with compounding, capital thresholds, and velocity. They are systematic, predictable, and devastating. And most people have no idea that their small daily actions that feel normal, are actively decelerating their financial trajectory. This is the essence of silent wealth destruction. By understanding the mathematical frameworks, the exponential nature of compounding, the structural thresholds of capital, and the velocity equation, you gain clarity. Once clarity exists, power becomes possible. Once power exists, action can be strategic rather than reactive. And that is the point. The system can be manipulated, but only once its mechanics are revealed. The next section will expose a psychological paradox: why intelligent, disciplined individuals still fail despite knowing the math, despite seeing the structural forces. You think mastery of numbers is enough, but the hidden force of social programming, lifestyle inflation, and decision fatigue often undermines the mathematically sound trajectory. That is where the story gets even more intense. Even with awareness of compounding, capital thresholds, and financial velocity, intelligent people still fail. This is not a matter of ignorance or laziness, or it is the power of social programming, lifestyle inflation, and environmental pressures, forces that operate independently of intellect or discipline. Wealth destruction is rarely caused by bad math. It is caused by misaligned psychology. And this misalignment is deeply structural. Consider lifestyle inflation. When income rises, spending rarely remains static. Subtle shifts occur. A slightly larger apartment, a marginally faster car, extra conveniences that feel earned. Individually, these adjustments seem rational, harmless, even justified. Collectively, however, they act as silent drains on capital velocity. Imagine someone who earns $80,000 a year and saves 20%. They increase earnings to $120,000, but now their lifestyle expands by $40,000. The net saving rate doesn't increase, it may even decrease. The wealth trajectory remains flat or declines, despite higher income. This is structural sabotage, invisible yet pervasive. Now, layer environmental pressures. Humans are social beings, and behavior is highly influenced by peers. Subtle cues, friends' purchases, co-workers' lifestyles, social media feeds, signal acceptable levels of consumption. Your brain interprets these signals as benchmarks, often subconsciously adjusting spending to match. You may believe you are making independent choices, but the system has already subtly nudged you off course. This is social programming in action. Wealth erodes quietly when your environment reinforces consumption over compounding. Decision fatigue is another invisible killer. Every day, your brain expends cognitive energy on countless small decisions. Each decision carries a micro cost, a mental depletion that increases the likelihood of taking the path of least resistance. In finance, this often manifests as inaction on high-impact opportunities, procrastination on debt repayment, or impulse spending. Decision fatigue is cumulative. The more frequently you engage in micro-decisions without structured systems, the more likely your financial trajectory veers downward. Even disciplined, intelligent individuals fall prey because their brains prioritize immediate relief over strategic alignment. Intelligence can even amplify failure. Highly analytical people often overcomplicate, overanalyze, and defer action, waiting for the perfect moment. Meanwhile, minor erosions continue daily. They understand the math, see the compounding effect, and still get trapped because the system preys on incomplete execution. Knowledge alone is powerless without behavioral alignment. The invisible system exploits overconfidence and perfectionism simultaneously. Consider an example. Two professionals earn $100,000 each. One implements a simple, structured investment and expense plan. The other meticulously researches every opportunity, delaying decisions by weeks or months. While the over-analytical professional believes they are optimizing, minor daily erosions, small indulgences, delayed contributions, unnoticed fees, compound unnoticed. Over a decade, the disciplined executor accumulates tens of thousands more, not because of income, but because they navigated the invisible mechanics correctly. This is structural advantage in action. Social comparison also creates hidden pressure to maintain an image of success. High earners often conceal financial stress while signaling wealth through consumption. Friends, colleagues, and online audiences reinforce these behaviors. The result? Even disciplined earners inflate expenses to maintain perceived status, further slowing wealth accumulation. The paradox is brutal. Demonstrating success externally undermines internal financial growth. The system rewards visibility, yet wealth itself requires invisibility, patience, and structural alignment. Cognitive overload exacerbates these pressures. Every decision about money, investments, budgets, lifestyle choices interacts with cognitive, emotional, and social systems. The human brain, while remarkable, is not optimized for decades-long compounding thinking. Most financial failure occurs not from mistakes of magnitude, but from consistent, minor misalignments amplified by systemic forces. The erosion is silent. It is invisible. It is inevitable if left unrecognized. To break free, you must reprogram perception. Intelligence alone is insufficient. Income alone is insufficient. Success in isolation does not guarantee wealth. Instead, the combination of structural awareness, system alignment, and behavioral mastery is required. Recognizing the invisible traps, lifestyle inflation, environmental pressure, decision fatigue, is the precursor to mastery. This is where most fail, and where the subtle architecture of wealth separates the silent winners from the majority. And here is the tension you must hold. The system is always active. Even when you feel disciplined, even when you earn more, the invisible forces continue to work. Every day you delay system alignment, erosion compounds. But once you understand these forces, you gain leverage. You can engineer your environment, your habits, and your decisions to resist invisible drains. And that sets the stage for the next phase, constructing a strategic wealth blueprint that systematically neutralizes these silent killers while accelerating your capital. The moment of clarity has arrived. Understanding the invisible forces that erode wealth is essential, but knowledge without action is meaningless. Now we construct the strategic wealth blueprint, a systemized, step-by-step framework designed to protect against daily erosion while accelerating capital accumulation. This is the architecture that silent winners live by. Step 1. Capital structure optimization. Think of your capital as a living system with multiple layers. Cash is not just money. It is liquidity for opportunity, insurance for risk, and the buffer against erosion. Investments are not just assets. They are the engine of compounding and thresholds of systemic advantage. Debt is not evil, but unstructured leverage is a silent killer. Your blueprint begins with a precise allocation of capital into 3 categories. Liquid reserves, fully accessible, to cover emergencies without disrupting compounding assets. Growth assets, equities, real estate, or other high-velocity investments aligned with long-term thresholds. Controlled leverage, strategically deployed only where return asymmetry outweighs risk. By structuring capital this way, you insulate your wealth against invisible erosions while simultaneously positioning it for acceleration. Step 2. Asset acquisition logic. Every asset you acquire must meet 2 criteria: compounding potential and systemic alignment. High-ticket items or status symbols are liabilities if they do not generate value or velocity. Real assets, business equity, diversified index positions, high-quality real estate, produce cascading benefits. Each acquisition is evaluated not in isolation, but within the vector of your overall system. This prevents emotional impulse from overriding structural integrity. Step 3. Risk mitigation architecture. Silent wealth destruction thrives on unpredictability. Unexpected expenses, market shifts, or personal emergencies can erode unprotected capital. To neutralize this, the blueprint mandates layered risk management, insurance aligned with lifestyle exposure, emergency funds calibrated to 3 to 6 months of living expenses, and investment diversification across non-correlated vehicles. These structures do not just protect, they allow compounding to continue uninterrupted, even under stress. Step 4. skill stacking and leverage. Wealth is not purely numeric. It is behavioral, intellectual, and strategic. Acquiring complementary skills compounds your earning potential while simultaneously reducing vulnerability to structural erosion. The principle is simple. The more versatile and scalable your skill set, the higher the ceiling for compounding income. Yet most people fail to integrate skill acquisition into their financial blueprint. Some silent wealth destruction occurs when income potential stagnates while consumption escalates. Skill stacking prevents this trap by producing both defense, resilience, and offense, growth. Step 5. Cash flow architecture. High net worth is meaningless without aligned cash flow. Strategic winners do not rely on income alone. They engineer streams that are diversified, predictable, and asymmetrically rewarding. Examples include rental income from real estate, dividends from equities, royalties from intellectual property, or residual business revenue. Cash flow is your weapon against erosion. It offsets lifestyle expenses, funds new assets, and shields against silent financial leaks. Step 6. Long-term asymmetry thinking. The blueprint demands a horizon measured in decades, not months. Asymmetry recognizes that certain actions disproportionately affect outcomes. Early, aligned investments, disciplined capital allocation, and threshold-reaching behaviors generate outsized results. This is why silent erosion is lethal. It prevents asymmetry from compounding over time. The strategic blueprint does not just stop erosion, it flips it, converting daily actions into multipliers of wealth velocity. Now, consider the interplay of these 6 steps. This is not a checklist. It is a dynamic system. Each step reinforces the others. Capital structure determines how effectively cash flow can be deployed. Risk mitigation allows compounding to proceed uninterrupted. Asset acquisition feeds skill stacking opportunities. Long-term asymmetry thinking ensures every decision, every dollar, and every action moves the system forward instead of backward. The blueprint is not theoretical. It is operational. For example, consider a professional with $100,000 in capital. They maintain $20,000 in liquid reserves, invest $60,000 in diversified growth assets, and deploy $20,000 in high-value skill development. By aligning cash flow streams to supplement lifestyle, insulating against risk, and focusing on threshold-reaching investments, their trajectory diverges exponentially from someone with identical income but unstructured spending, unchecked lifestyle inflation, and reactive decision-making. Over 10 years, the difference is not subtle. It is structural, visible, and irreversible. Here is the tension you must internalize. This blueprint is deliberately rigid, yet flexible in execution. The silent wealth killers exploit inconsistency. The more aligned, disciplined, and anticipatory your system, the less opportunity erosion has to operate. Every layer of the blueprint multiplies defense while simultaneously generating compounding offense. This is why some individuals quietly accumulate vast wealth, while others, equally intelligent and disciplined, stagnate. Execution is the differentiator. The next section, the acceleration phase, will reveal how to transform this blueprint from a protective system into a high-velocity engine. Income, assets, and leverage converge to amplify compounding. The foundation has been built. Now comes the phase where silent wealth killers are neutralized and asymmetry becomes unstoppable. With the strategic wealth blueprint firmly in place, so the next stage is acceleration phase, where defensive alignment transforms into offensive velocity. This is where the silent killers that once eroded wealth are neutralized, and your system begins to compound advantage at an exponential rate. Acceleration is not about working harder. It's about engineering dual engines of growth, income and assets, optimized to operate in synergy. Step 1. Dual engine system. Income plus assets. Your income provides momentum. Your assets provide acceleration. Most people rely solely on one or the other. The majority of high earners fail because they inflate consumption while income grows, leaving assets dormant. Conversely, asset-heavy individuals often neglect cash flow, relying on latent potential rather than liquidity. The silent winners combine both. They maximize income without lifestyle creep, while simultaneously deploying capital into high-velocity assets that generate compounding returns. This creates a feedback loop. Income feeds assets, assets amplify cash flow funds further assets. Silent erosion is effectively replaced by exponential growth. Step 2. Optionality strategy. Wealth acceleration thrives on flexibility. Optionality is the power to act decisively when opportunities present asymmetric returns. This requires liquidity, mental bandwidth, and network positioning. Every unnecessary friction, every status-driven expenditure, every distraction erodes optionality. Daily micro-leaks reduce your ability to exploit high-value windows. By aligning your blueprint to preserve optionality, you ensure that when a structural advantage emerges, market correction, undervalued asset, or entrepreneurial opportunity, you can act without hesitation. Optionality is leverage in its purest form, control without forced risk. Step 3. Leverage control versus leverage abuse. Leverage is a double-edged sword. Applied strategically, it multiplies gains without proportionally increasing risk. Misapplied, it accelerates decay silently. The key distinction is systemic alignment. Leverage that feeds compounding assets, real estate mortgages, strategic business credit, or carefully timed investment margin, is amplifying. Leverage that funds consumption, status signaling, or impulsive behavior is destructive. Silent wealth killers exploit misapplied leverage, which is why most high earners plateau or regress despite apparent financial sophistication. Step 4. Strategic timing windows. The universe of wealth creation is not uniform. There are periods of amplified opportunity. Financial markets, business cycles, and even personal life stages create windows where the velocity of capital can accelerate dramatically. Misalignment with timing often results in eroded advantage. The key is preparation, positioning assets, maintaining liquidity, and minimizing friction ensures you're capable of acting decisively when asymmetrical opportunities arise. Silent killers thrive in the gaps, the moments of unpreparedness where hesitation turns potential gains into lost advantage. Step 5. Continuous system feedback. Acceleration is not a static phase, it is dynamic. Daily monitoring of system vectors ensures micro-leaks are identified before they scale. Tracking cash flow, asset growth, debt exposure, and threshold progress prevents erosion from returning. Feedback loops allow for proactive adjustments, enabling compounding velocity to remain intact. This is why silent winners are not just disciplined. They are adaptive, strategic, and relentlessly aware of system alignment. The tension in this phase is psychological as much as mathematical. Many individuals fear leveraging and acceleration because the exposure to visible risk triggers emotional resistance. Yet the system is structured precisely to minimize unnecessary risk while amplifying asymmetrical upside. By maintaining liquidity, diversifying assets, and aligning income vectors, the acceleration phase transforms fear into optionality. Every strategic decision compounds both capital and psychological control. Let's illustrate with an example. Consider two professionals, is both with $200,000 in investable assets. Professional A maintains status quo, saving diligently, but rarely leveraging or seeking high-velocity opportunities. Professional B applies the acceleration principles, diversified asset deployment, optionality preservation, strategic leverage, and timing alignment. Over a decade, Professional B's assets multiply not incrementally, but exponentially, while Professional A stagnates despite similar earnings. The difference is not income, intelligence, or luck. It is system execution and velocity. The strategic insight here is clear. Acceleration is about alignment. Income, assets, leverage, timing, and optionality converge to create a self-reinforcing system. Once configured correctly, the silent wealth killers lose influence, unable to infiltrate a system optimized for velocity and structural resilience. Daily decisions now compound advantage rather than decay. The next section, Identity Evolution, will reveal the internal transformation required to sustain this acceleration. Velocity alone is insufficient. Your psychology, self-perception, and delayed gratification mechanisms must align with the system. Without this, even the best engineered acceleration will plateau. Acceleration is powerful, but without internal alignment, velocity alone cannot secure lasting wealth. This is where identity evolution becomes critical. Wealth is not just external. It is a reflection of internal systems, your beliefs, habits, and perception of time. Silent killers exploit psychological misalignment. They strike when you act from impulse, short-term desire, or miscalibrated identity. To sustain growth, your identity must evolve to match the systemic demands of accelerated wealth. Step 1. Internal psychological shift. Your brain is wired for short-term rewards. Dopamine pathways respond to immediate gratification, social validation, and perceived status. But wealth requires delayed gratification, structured risk-taking, and consistent alignment with compounding forces. Identity evolution begins by rewiring your perception of reward. A $50 impulse spent today is no longer a neutral choice. It is a visible vector against your long-term trajectory. Each decision is reframed as either building your future self or eroding it. The cognitive shift is subtle, but its impact is monumental. Step 2. Delayed gratification. Rewiring. The silent killers are deeply tied to instant reward. Social comparison, impulse purchases, and emotional spending all leverage immediate satisfaction. Delayed gratification, however, compounds advantage. Every decision to prioritize capital growth over transient reward strengthens both wealth and psychological resilience. Think of it as muscle training. The longer you resist the impulse, the stronger your financial self-discipline becomes, and the more capable you are of executing the blueprint under pressure. Step 3. Strategic detachment. Identity evolution requires detachment from external validation. Social pressure, peer comparison, and curated status imagery are silent drivers of erosion. The evolved identity recognizes that wealth is internal, systemic, and objective, not performative. Emotional independence allows you to execute high-leverage decisions without distraction, or hesitation, or justification. Detached decision-making is not cold, it is clarity. It transforms daily choices from reactive to strategic, neutralizing vectors of erosion before they can act. Step 4. Thinking in decades, not months. The acceleration phase teaches systemic action, but identity evolution teaches horizon management. Most people evaluate success in months, not decades. This creates impatience, overreaction, and vulnerability to silent erosion. An evolved identity recalibrates perception. Every action, expense, and investment is measured against a 10, 20, or 30-year horizon. Patience becomes a strategic weapon. Micro-decisions gain significance not for immediate effect, but for their cumulative, long-term impact. This is how silent killers are neutralized, by making them irrelevant to the framework of identity-aligned time. Next, Step 5. Systemic self-observation. Identity evolution is an ongoing practice. Daily reflection, monitoring of impulses, and active evaluation of decisions against long-term goals create feedback loops that reinforce alignment. Without systemic self-observation, even high-income or high-asset individuals drift into habitual erosion. Awareness alone is insufficient. Active feedback is required. The evolved identity internalizes the invisible architecture, aligning perception, behavior, and action seamlessly. Consider the psychological tension. You now understand compounding, velocity, thresholds, leverage, and optionality. Yet without internal alignment, every system can be undermined by impulse or misperception. Identity evolution resolves this tension. It creates coherence between thought, habit, and strategy. The silent wealth killers, emotional spending, status signaling, deferred consequence, no longer have leverage. Your perception of self, reward, and time neutralizes the vectors that previously eroded capital invisibly. To illustrate, a professional earns $150,000 and follows the strategic wealth blueprint, but struggles with social comparison. Impulses to keep up create erosion. Through identity evolution, detachment, long horizon thinking, delayed gratification, the same individual executes consistently. Micro-decisions now align with systemic advantage. Over a decade, wealth accumulation far exceeds peers who earn similar income but remain identity-bound to external pressures. Psychology becomes the engine that sustains acceleration. The critical insight is this: external systems can be optimized, but they are only as effective as the internal system operating them. Without identity evolution, acceleration is temporary, compounding is fragile, and silent wealth killers regain influence. With it, velocity, leverage, optionality, and compounding are fully harnessed, creating a self-reinforcing loop of structural advantage. The next section, Wealth Redefinition, will expand this transformation beyond numbers and assets. Wealth, freedom, and power are reimagined not as income, consumption, or status, but as systemic autonomy, decision velocity, and long-term influence. This is the stage where the evolved identity interprets wealth itself on an entirely new level. By now, you've mastered the architecture of wealth: invisible erosion, compounding, capital thresholds, velocity, acceleration, and identity alignment. But there is a deeper layer most people never reach: wealth redefinition. This is where the concept of wealth itself transforms, from a measure of income, assets, or status, into a systemic framework of freedom, autonomy, and asymmetry. Without redefining wealth, even the most optimized blueprint becomes transactional, and silent killers reassert influence through psychological loopholes. Step 1. Redefining wealth beyond income. Most people equate wealth with salary or earnings. This is a cognitive trap. Income is transient and finite. Wealth is persistent and compounding. True wealth is the capacity to act freely, make strategic decisions, and position capital advantageously regardless of short-term inflows. When wealth is measured by income alone, silent erosion is inevitable. Each paycheck is spent reacting to status signals or lifestyle pressures. Redefining wealth in systemic terms shifts focus from temporary rewards to enduring power. Step 2. redefining freedom beyond consumption. The habitual definition of freedom, spending money without restriction, is a silent killer. It reinforces instant gratification, erodes capital velocity, and activates behavioral traps. Real freedom is the ability to choose without compulsion, to wait, to invest, to act opportunistically. Freedom aligned with systemic leverage creates optionality, preserves compounding, and neutralizes silent erosion. By seeing freedom as autonomy over action rather than consumption, every decision becomes a vector of advantage. Step 3. Redefining power beyond status. A society teaches that power equals visibility. Cars, homes, vacations, social influence. But visibility is costly, fragile, and leveraged by emotional impulse. Real power is systemic, the ability to influence outcomes, control risk, and accelerate capital silently. It exists in networks, asymmetrical knowledge, and optionality. Power redefined is durable. It compounds like assets. Status without systemic alignment is a drain, while invisible power amplifies the blueprint exponentially. Step 4. Wealth as a system, not a scorecard. This is the critical insight. Silent killers thrive on scorecard thinking, measuring success by numbers that fluctuate, comparisons, and externally visible metrics. By reorienting toward system metrics, velocity, compounding, optionality, leverage, and threshold progression, you neutralize the erosion vectors. Every daily decision is now evaluated against the system, not perception. Micro-decisions, impulse triggers, and social pressures are filtered through structural alignment, converting potential leaks into vectors of compounding growth. Step 5. The psychological asymmetry of redefined wealth. Once wealth is reconceptualized as systemic autonomy rather than status or consumption, silent erosion loses relevance. The evolved identity internalizes long-term thinking, structural alignment, and optionality. Daily actions no longer act against your trajectory. They compound advantage. Spending, saving, investing, and even indulgence are evaluated in terms of asymmetrical impact. The system rewards alignment and punishes misalignment, but now the evolved self interprets and controls the forces rather than being manipulated by them. To consider the tension shift. The evolved individual no longer fears erosion because their wealth definition itself neutralizes the silent killers. Assets, income, cash flow, and leverage are no longer merely tools. They are extensions of strategic autonomy. Lifestyle decisions, consumption impulses, and social pressures are reframed as vectors within a larger systemic equation. Every choice either multiplies advantage or is consciously rejected. This is structural mastery. Here's the final insight. Wealth is not what you hold. It is what you control. Control over time, control over decisions, and control over capital create durable freedom. Income without systemic control is transient. Assets without velocity are inert. Status without identity evolution is hollow. By redefining wealth as structural autonomy, optionality, and asymmetry, you create a self-sustaining system that converts daily action into perpetual compounding, neutralizing silent erosion before it can act. This reframing is the culmination of the journey. Awareness of the system, acceleration, identity evolution, all converge to form a new paradigm. Wealth is no longer a number, a paycheck, or a comparison. It is the systemic leverage you hold over time, decision, and opportunity. The final section will crystallize this journey into challenge plus ascension close, tying the invisible lessons, strategic blueprint, and evolved identity into an actionable, unforgettable call to action. You now see it. The silent killers, the invisible erosion of wealth that operates beneath the surface of every daily decision, have been revealed. You understand the architecture, the velocity, the compounding mathematics, the psychological misalignments, and the systemic traps that destroy fortunes quietly, invisibly, and relentlessly. But understanding alone is not enough. Knowledge without execution is the playground of regret. Here is your challenge. For the next 30 days, identify every vector of erosion in your life. Track impulse spending, micro leaks, lifestyle inflations, and status-driven choices. Map them against your strategic blueprint. Evaluate each action through the lens of systemic advantage. Does it compound power, optionality, and autonomy? Or does it feed erosion silently? Every choice is now a test, and every test matters exponentially. You must act. The blueprint, acceleration, and identity evolution are not theoretical. They are operational. They demand discipline, conscious attention, and unwavering alignment. The wealth is no longer a distant aspiration. It is a system that requires deliberate participation. You're no longer a passive participant in a world of invisible erosion. You're now an active architect of compounding advantage. Visualize your future self. Decades from now, executing daily with clarity, control, and velocity. Each micro-decision aligned perfectly with long-term asymmetry. Your wealth is no longer threatened by impulse, social pressure, or minor inefficiencies. Your freedom, power, and systemic leverage have multiplied silently, invisibly, yet inexorably. This is the state of the silent winner. Now act decisively. Replace hesitation with velocity, impulse with alignment, and comparison with systemic clarity. Daily actions must be vectors of accumulation, not erosion. Delay no longer, because every day wasted compounds the very forces that destroy wealth silently. This is the ascension point, the moment where knowledge, system mastery, and evolved identity converge. And remember this, above all else, the wealth that slips away quietly today is the wealth you will never miss if your system is mastered. Build the system. Protect the vectors. Let compounding be your silent ally. This is not theory. This is structural. This is irreversible once executed. You are now standing at the threshold where silent wealth killers are neutralized, where every decision multiplies advantage, and where your financial trajectory becomes unstoppable. The choice is yours. Will you step into the system, or will the erosion continue, invisible, silent, and inevitable? The system is waiting. Your move defines everything.